I'm here with Wayne. Happy New Year, Wayne.
Happy New Year. How are you? You're looking great. You're looking really good, my friend.
Oh, is that right? I'm fine. Yes, all good. Enjoyed my Christmas and New Year break. So it was fine. Quiet family stuff, and then didn't do much over New Year. I guess when you get older, you kind of give up on the doing some mega night out. So it was rather. I stayed up with my 10-year-old. Everyone else went to bed, and I stayed up with my 10-year-old and saw in the New Year.
Oh, nice.
So.
Yeah, there's a moment in everybody's life, and considering that we're continuing a conversation about us being approaching lower middle age, and I'm pretty sure we've both reached this moment in life where you equate the value of a journey out into the abyss with the length of recovery time it will take, and decide whether these things are worth it or not. And New Year's is a journey not worth it. So I commend you on your sensible choice.
Yeah. Well, it was, yes, absolutely right. As you get older, the recovery time gets longer, and the amount of drinking or self-abuse you can do is much less. It's just your body's way of telling you to know your limit.
Yeah.
I think. It was a busy time for United, despite the lack of football since when we played Forest, and there hasn't been a game since the Forest game, so no midweek game, and we're not playing till Monday, so it's actually a surprisingly long break for this time of year for the team, but actually surprisingly busy at the club as well, because Jim Ratcliffe and his team obviously announced the partial takeover on Christmas Eve, and then on Boxing Day released a 240-page SEC filing, which we talked about last time, which everyone has pored over in great detail, sexy stuff. And then he was in the club just this last week with his team meeting, but ostensibly meet and greets, because the takeover hasn't been ratified yet, or partial takeover, I should say.
Yeah.
To meet the interim CEO and the manager, the football director, and so on. So we've got that to talk about. There's some transfers and contract news to discuss, which caused like a minor controversy online. I don't know. Didn't think much of the contract extensions. And then there's the game against Wigan on Monday night in the FA Cup to talk about. So I don't know. Let's where should we start?
Start with the triggering of the online community and the triggering of the extensions.
Oh, yeah.
That seems like a good place. I've missed this, by the way. I haven't missed the news, but I've missed the triggering. I could imagine, considering the identity of the individuals, some people would be riled up. It seems fairly sensible, right?
Yeah. I think so what was it? It was Victor Lindelof given a 1-year extension. Well, they triggered the 1-year option, which the club seems to put into all the deals these years. And Aaron Wan-Bissaka, an extra year. They would have both been out of contract in the summer, so they're both extended to 2025. And the non-triggering of the contract extension for Rafa Varane, which of the three, he's obviously the sort of highest profile, most silverwared. I think I've made that word up. But also has the highest wages. So, so they didn't trigger that one. Still can do. At any point between now and the summer, if they decide to. They've certainly done that with players in the past. So, I think the controversy is just like people want more and more and more, don't they? And in Lindelof and Wan-Bissaka, you've got two players who have mixed performances over their times with United. But I know I would argue, maybe you have a different view. I'd argue that perfectly good squad players maybe haven't lived up to £80 million worth of talent there. I don't know. But I'm sure Ten Hag would like them in his squad, and he's used both pretty extensively. Probably Lindelof more than Wan-Bissaka this season.
First of all, because of Lindelof's availability, and that's one thing that you can say about Lindelof, is that he's generally been available. He's had a few injuries, but he's generally been the one who's always available when other players are injured. So there's that reliability about him. I will agree. I do think it's a fair thing to say that, is it 80 million worth? I know you and Paul made the excellent welcome back, Paul, for your fleeting appearance. Always welcome to watch when I'm not participating, but you are welcome to be on when I'm participating as well. I just think there's not enough room, obviously, for three voices in this kind of dynamic. Wow, that sounded so cruel.
Well, I did. Yeah.
Ed, why don't you clear off and then Paul and I can talk?
Right. Hey, you're more than welcome to, yeah.
That was I don't mean that. I do mean the nice things. I don't mean the unnecessarily critical things. Anyway, so the point was made really well about the value of, United have spent is about that value in the players, obviously. That's a very different conversation. Is there 80 million's worth of value in Wan-Bissaka and Lindelof? I don't think for 30 million, considering the market value of players, I think Lindelof is probably fair to see what we've got from him. We've probably had about that. And I won't say he's been a fantastic player. There were times where he has looked fairly timid, but then and it was kind of amusing to me, the Iceman persona that they sort of bestowed upon him. But within this dynamic of United's defenders, it probably is the Iceman. I don't know how it happened, but he kind of has grown into that a little. I wouldn't say that he's particularly vintage-like, but I think he's, in terms of resolution, I think he's fairly good like that. Wan-Bissaka is a curious one because if you ask me, does he have the potential to be a £50 million right back? I think absolutely. I still think there's a potential of the best defensive right back in the league in there. And he played his recovery to come back last season after Christmas because he was out. Not just out in the cold, he was like Donny van der Beek out. Yeah. So his recovery last season was magnificent, and his performances have generally been that way. He's had a couple of stinkers, don't get me wrong, but who hasn't? And he's been very consistent. I think since his return, a lot of us have looked at what he brings to the side and said, "This is brilliant what he brings to the side." Since his return, I'm talking since Ten Hag has been manager and he brought it back in, there hasn't been as much discourse about his attacking output and things like that, which I think is nice because there are many things to criticise about many of United's players, so it's nice to just concentrate on the positives.
Yeah.
We've seen that. He's not been in the squad because of Dalot being selected, even when he's been recovering from injury, which is a curious thing, but I think Ten Hag has displayed excessive patience with some players. And this seems to be one of those cases.
Yeah.
And Wan-Bissaka's perhaps suffered from that. So I think the exercising of the options is very good. Whether or not the value for money is a different thing. Wan-Bissaka's still got potential to do so. I think you're right in terms of them being squad players. Do I see Lindelof in a team that challenges for the league? No. Do I see Wan-Bissaka in a team that challenges for the league? It's a maybe, but you'd have to sort out the rest of the defence.
Yeah.
There's a potential that he's a really, really good player in Wan-Bissaka. His tackling is some of the best that I've seen at the club. And I go back to you see his tackling ability. I'm talking about Paul McGraw, Wes Brown, players who love to watch make a tackle because the art of tackling, they understand it. Which you don't always see with defenders.
No,
and you can appreciate that in Wan-Bissaka. So people may be upset. I'm not. I think they're sensible.
I think it's fine. I think the curious thing with Wan-Bissaka is if you were going to, both him and Dalot are flawed players in different ways. I mean, they're not. Wan-Bissaka's obviously quite limited going forward. He's, I guess, improved, although his numbers don't really show it. He's not awesome in possession. Then again, Dalot, who's supposedly better, often doesn't show that either. He's comfortable inverting in a way that Wan-Bissaka isn't, but he doesn't really provide any attacking output either. But the curious thing I find is if you were going to give a 5-year contract, it probably, for me, would have been Wan-Bissaka and then improve on Dalot, go find an attacking right back somewhere. And they did it the other way around. So that was a little curious, I think.
Yeah.
Because I'm not sure that amongst Dalot's intermittent years with United, he's really ever shown the kind of quality that would deserve another contract, but maybe that was the old regime, and now we're into a new era, and they're going to take a different view on contracts and renewals and so on. But Varane, the other one, I mean, I think the thing is, he's obviously like we just saw with his performance at Liverpool, he's obviously still the best defender that we've got. You know, he can put in that kind of stupendously high quality performance. There are reasons why Ten Hag doesn't quite trust him, and I think it's about retention of possession, although it seems in this particular team, like he's almost punishing Varane for not being the player that he wants in 6 months' time when we've got over all the problems, not now.
Yeah.
And then there's his fitness record, which is pretty poor, but unsurprising given it wasn't so awesome right at the end of his time at Real Madrid as well. And we talked about it on the pod when he signed. So, and he's on massive wages.
Sorry to interrupt, sir. The thing with Varane, and I think you're absolutely right. I think it probably does come down to the injury thing and the fact that the disparity in what the other defenders can and can't do and the other defenders' record of availability and the disjoint nature that can bring to our disruptive backline from game to game is probably the thing that's put Varane on the sidelines because, you know, like him or not, Maguire, he's such a dominant personality in terms of how his strengths and weaknesses impact everyone else. But because he was available for that period of time and Ten Hag had to kind of model that defence around him, it does impact what you can do around him. And obviously, for whatever reason, and it's probably right for Varane and Maguire, he doesn't see as a complementary pairing. And I think that's the thing that impacts Varane on top of the, you know, his own flaky availabilities because there's such disjointedness in that backline, and the qualities of all of those players do not seem, you know, like Chelsea's backline under Mourinho with Carvalho and Cole and Ferreira and whoever else they're right back and Terry. All of the qualities obviously complemented each other and they were perfectly drilled and everything like that. And United's, and you can argue this through the entire squad, is that one player doesn't seem to complement the player who's playing the side of him, you know. And we have tried, you know, Ten Hag is trying to get there, and he's kind of getting there when he's got a fully fit complement. But when we don't, the disjointedness of it and the disparity of these qualities from one player to the next is so extreme. I think that in Varane's case, where he has been available, but only sort of intermittently, that's why he's been on the sidelines for as long as he has been, because it's been so difficult for Ten Hag to sort of say, I can't keep moving my backline like this. I've got to kind of get some stability in there. And it wasn't great because option B, which we saw with Lindelof and Maguire, and unfortunately we've seen for years before Ten Hag, isn't up to it. It's cost us massively in certain games.
I think it's fair enough. But one thing about that Chelsea back four, I mean, the talents were complementary. The other thing is they're all total assholes. All of them. Absolutely. To a man. The most vile humans you can imagine.
Yeah, that was a great talent spot for that. I'll pick those for him. See, I was going to go Arsenal with Winterburn, Bold, Adams and Dixon. But I'm talking to supporters of my age and we're trying to appeal to a younger audience. And that's still 2005. Good grief. 2005. That's 10 years ago. Don't correct me, anyone.
Let's make some comparisons with Martin Buchan and
I'd go there, but
you would alienate anyone under 45, I think, at that point. So, all right. Well, I guess that's contracts. We're going to hear lots more about that, I imagine. One, Dave Brailsford, Jean-Claude. I was going to call it Jean-Claude Van Damme, Jean-Claude Blanc. That would be a story. Jean-Claude Van Damme is taking over as Manchester United CEO.
Jean-Claude Laurent Blanc. He could have gone that way as well.
Well, could have gone that way as well. So Blanc, Brailsford, and Ratcliffe were all at United this week. Meet and greets, meeting the staff, which I have to say, like, two things they've done without actually even having ratified their ownership yet, the new group. One, they've come and meet the staff. You know, that's a pretty rare event over the last 20 years or so, and in a quite public way. And they've injected some new capital. Well, there'll be $200 million worth of capital immediately and another 100 before some point this year, 2024. Could be at any point, but certainly before the 31st of December. So positives already. There's been quite a lot of commentary around the meetings. So Ten Hag talked about it. He said, we talked for hours and hours, and we were aligned on a lot of issues. It did get me thinking, and maybe this is the way my brain works. What are they not aligned on? I really wanted to be a fly on that wall.
Yeah, it's most of the issues, wasn't it?
Most of the issues, yeah. I was like, oh, please tell me. What is it you disagreed about? I want to know. Because that would have been juicy. But a lot of reporting, so I don't know. It sounded like some commentary, back channel commentary going into some reporters. Mark Critchley did a deep piece on The Athletic about this. But as you can imagine, they are looking at, and apparently this is the case, they are looking at the structure of the football side of the club first, and then they'll worry about the manager later. And for me, that's exactly what they should do. Let's get the systems in place that are right, and then worry about whether Ten Hag's the right man or not later in the summer or something like that. There's plenty of time to think about that. So, I don't know what your thoughts were on the week, but I don't know. It gave me positive vibes already.
And also the only flippant comment we made on the last pod was the communication with Most as well, which was previous to this week. So there are three things that they've done before actually being ratified as part of Manchester United officially. So, it's got to be positive. Everything seems like it's positive in terms of that. You're right, the communication is vital. It's very good. These things, the normals take for granted that there should be communication and things like that. So to have, and it seems like, I'm not doing the begging ball, poor biggest club in the world, Manchester United, but we're not used to these things. So to see it happen, and also the fact that they were there because these things can be done anywhere in the world these days. These things can be done anywhere. So for all of them to be there on the ground, talking to people, having those conversations is obviously it's only a positive thing. The thing that I would say is that because these are the first steps, we don't know anything about it. The pleasantries, really, everything's pleasantries, and at least they are pleasantries because these things can be screwed up as well. But everything's going well so far. The PR sort of mission is working. It couldn't have failed, I don't think. But you can hit a bum note unpredictably. United haven't done that so far. Ratcliffe and everyone are saying the right thing. All of the feeling, all of the vibe about it is really positive. There's not a wrong step so far, and obviously we wait to see how these things operate in action. I've got to say that I did find it funny, the exact same thing that you did with Ten Hag saying that, most of the things, because I'm like, he's not in a position. By the way, anyone who's listened to us all season knows that I'm going to back Ten Hag beyond what's reasonable. Ball 5-0 at home to Liverpool and stuff like that. There's obviously a line, but I'm still going to back the manager beyond what most people would consider reasonable. So, I back him to concede and to continue, and hope that he continues and succeeds beyond the summer. But I do find it funny that he said that. It's kind of like he's the one holding all the cards, and it's kind of no. We've lost 14 games before the turn of the year. That's going to be one of the key things that we don't agree about. And unfortunately, that's one of the things that you've delivered, and that's going to have to be rectified in the short term. And there are some question marks over the things that you've been doing lately, pal. And they're fair to be asked, so don't come here. It sounded like he was the one calling the shots to them, which, I will say this one thing about all of this structure, and sorry for going on, but the thing that I want to see from this, and I do want to see it from the manager, but it's difficult when you get into the nitpicking of the individual results because all of the individual decisions become fairly scrutinized, like substitutions and things like that. You didn't see that a lot under, and I'm not just using this because it's successful and it's the obvious frame of reference, but under Ferguson, you wouldn't see scrutinization of substitutions or team selections because there was a bigger picture at play. And yes, all right, you didn't because you wouldn't question him because of success. But what I mean is, in a successful structure, you don't normally see that kind of micro scrutinization of individual decisions. Like, you have a manager who operates with broad strokes. They make major decisions. And unfortunately for Ten Hag, this isn't his own making, all of it, is that he's had a lot of those broad stroke decisions like Sancho, like Greenwood, like Ronaldo, the massive operational decisions that can, if handled wrongly or incorrectly or handled well, they have a massive positional shift over the mood of the entire club and the way they move.
Yeah.
And a lot of those decisions he's got right. But the smaller stuff in terms of the injuries and everything like that, well, obviously that might not be his fault. But then all of the decisions that are made when form is going bad, when all of the micro-analysis has come about with the substitutes and the team selections, a lot of those are missteps of late. And I want, and I hope that this is something that can be rectified by the end of the season, and maybe it can, maybe it can't. But this is mostly on the manager and his ability to pull himself out of this all, is that by the end of the season, we're talking about United in those kind of broad strokes again, because he can do that. We weren't talking about it at the end of last season either, because he was getting all of even though the form was bad and it had dropped off, we'd still got to where we needed to be. In some elements, we probably overachieved as well. And he had that credit in the bank. He doesn't have that now. And now, so it is kind of, that's the thing that I want to see in this in these next few weeks. And that's when you see a club that's well managed from top to bottom. And you can take, I mean, now, I think, and you're in a position to comment on this, I think things like the debt, things that really saddled the club down before, are almost inconsequential issues is the word that I'm looking for, in terms of how we'll be operating in that sort of like 18 to 24 month period. So it does become about the decisions that Ratcliffe and Brailsford make in terms of the personnel that they employ and the direction that we'll begin to see what they see from the football side. That will only really become apparent over 18 months. But then also that Ten Hag thing, that we can start looking at him and start looking at the broader strokes, the management, and say, all right, well, this is how his defence looks, this is how his midfield looks, this is how the attack looks, this is how his team looks, all of these kind of things, without saying, he's picked bloody Maguire next to Lindelof and it's not working. Why is he playing Dalot at left back? All of those little things that you only really get into the nitty-gritty like that when a club's in crisis. You don't ask those questions when a team's going well. Or when a manager is showing good leadership. That part's on Ten Hag. Whether or not he's being handicapped, hamstrung by, hand-tied, handcuffed by all of the things that are around him. I've been trying to find handcuffed is probably the right term, for everything that's around him in terms of what he's been able to do. All of the questions that have been asked are fair. I've given him plenty of excuses, but he's in this period of time where he's got leeway above him in terms of they're going to let him manage for this next 6 months or so. The players are coming back. We should see some form of identity, discounting the thought of another crisis, which could happen, you never know. Assuming it doesn't, we should see something that looks like a proper team. So then you should see strong leadership. It doesn't matter then if you talk about, and I know, sorry, I'm going on, Ed, but it doesn't matter if you talk about FA Cups and Champions League qualification, because you're talking about direction. And that's the most important thing that's going to matter to Manchester. From my point of view, as a supporter, that's the thing that matters most to Manchester United. At least I think this clarity over the last 2 weeks provides us, as supporters, some clear ground to now evaluate what the manager can do for the next 5 months. He'll be judged fairly on what's
on that.
time.
I think that's all fair. And a few points in there. So we're not going to see a lot of movement right now in terms of new sporting director, money in the winter window, or anything like that. I don't think that's likely to happen. We'll see that over the next few weeks and so on. These things always take time. If they do bring in some of the names that have been mentioned in the press, there are gardening leave windows and all of that in contracts and so on. So it's going to take a little while for the big structural things to come out. And I'm sure that Ratcliffe will take the big picture here and think about like getting that bit right first. And I think that was some of the commentary in the press, that his people were letting it be known that he wants to get that bit right. What is going to deliver for Manchester United in the long term? What is going to deliver success? Something that came out in the press that he didn't say directly, but has been reported on by multiple sources, is that he considers success to be silverware and getting United back to a preeminent position on the pitch rather than revenue and making money. Now, of course, he can say that from a personal point of view because he's worth £30 billion and is the largest shareholder in a albeit private company that delivers 60 billion a year in revenues, right? So this guy's fuck you rich beyond comprehension, right? So he can say that. But also, isn't that what we always wanted? We want a benevolent dictator. If it's not going to be fan ownership, the next best thing is benevolent dictator. And in fact, from a governance point of view, it may even be better than fan ownership. And he's coming across in the very early portion of his ownership as, a fan that wants the best for the club. And that gives me all good vibes. Now, whether they make the right decisions around the personnel and the structure, we'll see in time. I think I said on the pod with Paul last week that they made a lot of mistakes, but they're probably going to learn from those mistakes. And they appear to have done so at Nice. And they made some backroom changes there and tried to get the structure right. And hopefully they've learned from that. And the club can move forward. You mentioned the debt. Briefly on that one, I don't think anything will happen on that for quite some time. And that's because he's a partial owner, not a full owner. And so I would not expect to see any movement on debt before we got a 3-year window. I think it'll happen sooner, but a 3-year window in which either 100% sale will happen to a third party, as yet unknown, or to Ratcliffe and INEOS. And then we can see whether that debt is cleared or not. I don't think it matters so much. Obviously, it's £20 million worth of interest a year, which could be put to something else. We already know those dividends aren't going to be taken for the next 3 years. That's £22 million a season that is now going back into the club, not out of it, which is a good thing. For me, it all feels like a positive start. We'll see what decisions are made, but clearly there's some different thinking here. I did think it, just to close out this bit, it was kind of amusing that there were no direct quotes, right? But from any of the parties, except for Ten Hag on this. There's some back-channel reporting, and part of this is because there's a quite broadly written non-disparagement clause in the sales contract, which is very, very common, nothing special here. But basically, don't slag off your new partners, which I think is fair enough. Much as we'd, I'm sure, love to have him take the microphone at Old Trafford and dump on Joel and Avi. Don't expect him to do so. But it's quite close to the wind, I would say, just on terms of the back channel commenting. But yeah, all good fun. Anyway, that's more.
You
go ahead.
You wanted to close out, but I have to jump in with one last thing. You mentioned Martin Buchan. I'm going to go way further back, just because I can. I've got freedom to do so in democratic society. God, what am I talking? I'm talking about James Gibson. That's what I'm talking about. And
that is way back. Yeah, you were just a little nipper when he was around as well.
Yeah, I had a full head of heard. Oh, God. Okay, so we're going back almost 100 years. So 1933, he became United chairman. His era of benevolence was, like he saved the club from bankruptcy. He sent every player a Christmas turkey before and made sure their salaries were paid in full to sort of assure them could have a good Christmas. Then he provided the club with transfer money as a guarantee. He provided them to sort of say, this is a gift to the club. You don't have to pay it back. All these kind of things. He paid for travel infrastructure around Old Trafford to make sure that the old-timers who supported Manchester United but couldn't get to Old Trafford, so they were at Bank Street before United moved to Old Trafford, the ones who couldn't get there provided infrastructure so they could get across the city, made it an easily accessible, and that's all the things that sort of went towards making United an accessible team, which made them the national and global powerhouse, and obviously provided the money to buy the cliff. He provided the finances for and the infrastructure for the youth system. He provided the money for rebuilding, development of Old Trafford. He provided that money again after Old Trafford was bombed in the war. He toe to toe with Matt Busby in the early years with when Busby was sort of struggling. Gibson was saying, take some money for some players. And he was like, no, I'd want to do it my way, which, if you can imagine a chairman trying to hoist money upon a manager, and the manager going, no, I'm going to play the youth players instead. And it all worked out for United, and Gibson did get to see United lift silverware. And unfortunately didn't get to see the full fruits of the labour, but he his benevolence was seen, and, the Gibson family remain, even to this day, close associated with United. It drips down the generations now. And of course, it's, I think, Alan Emily, his great nephew, who I've managed to speak to on a couple of occasions. He's really nice, actually. And obviously they're very, very proud of what they did, what their uncle did. And obviously, James' wife, Lillian, was on the board of directors for United for a long period of time. All of this history lesson, Ed, for people who don't know it, is because the Edwards ownership from the 60s onwards, and obviously the Glazer ownership, is all pretty much anyone alive has experienced of Manchester United, and both of those ownerships, you can argue the merits of either of them, or the negatives of either of them.
Yep.
But they've both been controversial, and I would argue, and I have a conversation about it, but this isn't the time or place, that there are some really good things that Martin Edwards did as chairman in terms of making sure that the club operated and redeveloped Old Trafford to make it the stadium that it was for a long period of time. He was a major driving force in that, even to the point we were all getting frustrated that we couldn't sign Gabriel Batistuta and things like that. Well, I would still like to see Batistuta play at Old Trafford, but I do like the fact that Old Trafford was developed into the behemoth that it has become. Now, all of that, again, to say that this is the first time in all of these generations, in a near century, that we've got an owner who is seeking to use his power in the same way, really, in a modern way, as James Gibson. He's seen his position as a custodian of the club, and he wants to effect positive change to Manchester United. But he's willing to input his own. And we're talking about a club who doesn't need money, by the way. He doesn't need outside injection, but he's providing capital injection to kind of facilitate, expedite that process. These are reasons, and I can't even express and articulate within the space of this podcast. And I know you want to talk about Wigan. I've seen the clock, Ed, don't worry. I'm so sorry. You were wrapping this point up. I'm just saying that these are reasons beyond anything that you, or even you with all the financial knowledge that you've got and the way that you've articulated and broke down every step and sinew of all of this deal. There are reasons beyond things that we can't articulate for everyone to be positive, so long as it always comes with the caveat that the decision making is right, and that is something that we can't guarantee. But because of the benevolence, that we've never seen that in a century of ownership, in our entire lifetimes, we have never seen this in Manchester United. Everyone should be optimistic about this, and that's my end part on it, Ed. I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure that I put that point, because I think a lot of people are going to lose the historical significance in that, and I don't think it's something that should be lost.
I think that's great context, Wayne. Yeah, I think it's really important thing to say. This is the first time, in a century that an owner has put in really significant amounts of capital to the club. And the Edwards family did do some good things, obviously very controversial as well, not least the first IPO in 1991, in which they took money out rather than putting money in. But great point on Big Sir Jim's and his own personal wealth that he's put into it. And there's quite a lot more of that to put in if he really wants to. So, all right, we'll move on from that, and I'm sure there'll be more details coming out in the weeks to come that we can pour over. We have Wigan on Monday night. Sadly, for some of the folks making the short trip to Wigan, there aren't actually any trains back after the game. So if you're making the trip there, sorry about that. The powers that be thinking about the fans first, as always. But it is a very short trip to Wigan. When was the last time we played Wigan? I guess when they were in the Premier League a few years back now. And it's been a club that has gone through some really tough times recently, talking of ownership. Dave Whelan, no longer with us, but also gave up ownership. They had financial troubles. They got relegated. They had points deductions. So they seem to be, they've got new owners now, so they seem to be safe and okay. And that's what we want with our community clubs, so them to be alive, right? And so they are alive and they look okay now. And moving forward, and first time in a while we've played them. So I'm sure the however many thousands of fans that are going there will enjoy the magic of the cup this weekend.
We haven't played Wigan since they won the FA Cup.
Yeah, and who did they beat in the final?
I know this, and not only because of the identity of the opponents. It was on my birthday. I'd gone out, and I forget where we went, but we came back because I didn't really have any interest in watching City win the FA Cup. But we came back like literally the last 2 minutes, and we switched it on, and then saw the glorious Ben Watson score against Manchester City. So give me the best birthday present of the year. It was it was great. I can't remember the result in the last season. I can imagine that we probably won in the last season. I do remember them beating us in 11-12. So it cost us as we were going for the title. But we had a long run when they were first promoted in the Premier League. Again, history lessons. We had a long run of beating it. And I know because I've been listening to all of these mini discs with Paul Jewell over the last week or so. I've been listening a lot to the 05-06 season. And we beat Wigan 4-0 in the first game at Old Trafford. And then we got them in the Carling Cup final. And Jewell says, he's referring back to his Bradford days where he came up with them in the Premier League. We beat them 4-0 back-to-back games. Anyone who wants a memory of that one can just put on Paul Scholes' goal against Bradford at the Valley Parade in the towel kit. So that's how far back we're going. Some of you listeners weren't even born. Why do I have to make everything about aging? Anyway.
I don't know. I think it's because you're getting old and it's on your brain, Wayne.
I know.
The Carling Cup final, that was the one at the Millennium Stadium, if I'm correctly.
I'm saying, not on the ramble, Joel says, before the final, he says, look, I'm not bothered as long as we don't lose 4-0 again. I'm sick of losing 4-0 against Manchester United. You know what the score was.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I went to that one. I remember not being able to get back very easily because Cardiff Station couldn't cope with the number of fans that are there. But
foreshadowing for Monday night's game where no one's going to be able to get back. There you go.
Yeah, well, it's a short walk, isn't it? Just 30 miles or so.
Wigan.
They're only one these days, so it's an opportunity. Oh God, I can't believe I'm going to say this. For Ten Hag to get some confidence into the squad with a comfortable victory. For podcast listeners, I am making a face because, nothing has been comfortable this season. The interesting thing is, I guess Andre Onana is going to play in this one. I mean, it looks like there's been some shenanigans with him going to AFCON, and he's going to play against Spurs on the 14th, and then for his national team on the 15th. Which I even got to getting onto Google and working out the flights and like how the hell, because it's not taking place in Abidjan either, the match, and so he's got a bit of a trek to get there in time, which is kind of interesting. So maybe he'll play, or maybe we'll see Bayern. I'm not sure. It's kind of interesting. We took a national team player in Bayern, Fenerbahce's first team keeper, and he's not had a sniff at all this season. So I don't think any of us knows whether he's any good or not. So maybe he'll play. It'd be nice to see him, I guess.
Yeah.
And apart from that, there's not a lot of leeway in the squad. Quite a lot of the younger players were training with the first team this week, so I guess they'll fill out some of the substitutes bench with some of the younger players. There's not a lot of leeway, given the extensive injuries the United have got, to make a lot of changes here. So it's going to be a pretty strong side either way.
My thought, he's not going to change the squad a lot. I think they can't really afford to take many chances. And again, you said like touch wood and everything like that. Can't really afford to take too many chances with this one. I'm not saying that I think he's got to win the FA Cup, but he can't afford an embarrassment really, and so he can't take a chance. And the thing is, like you just alluded to there, like with Bayern not playing, Ten Hag generally, where he can, plays his strongest side. He did that to detriment probably last season, but he did it to prove a point, because I'm sure it doesn't take too much stretching of the memory cells to remember all of the disjointed, inconsistent 11s that we were playing in, and then he ran 11 to death, which, great, because we wanted to see that kind of consistency in selection. He's trying to do that again. It's been difficult for him to do that again. So we are going to see that. But we are in territory, because Wigan will fancy themselves like they've seen what happened with Forest, and they know that it's a matter of attitude, very much so with this Manchester United side. So it's not something that you can take for granted. You're looking at Manchester United side, and really what you're saying is there Mark Robbins in there? And we're saying that for every game. Because that's the severity of the situation. And I'm not saying it could get sacked after every result. I'm talking about players who can turn the fortunes of this club around. But we are there, and these players need to stand up.
Yeah. I mean, God, it would. I mean, all the chat about Ten Hag making it to the summer and taking the big picture into account. The things that would change that dynamic are if United lost a whole bunch of games in a row again, and we don't actually have a lot of games in January to lose.
True.
We're not playing very many. But I guess if we lost this one and then to Spurs, people will be asking questions again. Yeah. I don't expect to lose to Wigan. This is a club trying to rebuild. There's obviously, I don't know, 50 places between the sides or something like that. So, you wouldn't expect it. Hey, but we're of an age to come back to that theme. We're of an age when the magic of the cup and giant killing was, some of my earliest football memories. Not with well, actually, I was going to say not with United, but there were a few. Bournemouth, wasn't it, in the mid '80s? I remember that one. I don't expect Wigan to actually give United some trouble here, but. You never know. And that is without having seen Wigan play at all this season. So maybe they're much better than I think. So, or would assume. I'm assuming.
Much more confident than I am. which is telling you something.
Yeah. All right. I think that's it. I will let you go, Wayne, to your Friday evening.
Oh, well, I'm getting back in my DeLorean and going back to meet James Gibson to talk about Martin Buchan, because that's me hitting the history books for another night. You know what it's like with me. Boring. Don't use that as the title of the podcast.
No, I won't, but it may be on the terraces on Monday night. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll catch you again soon.